Hi, this is Kim Watson. In this video I'm going to look at the 5 things that you should know about trading floor pivots, trading pivots. There's many different types of pivots, but I'm looking specifically at floor pivots here. So let's start looking. Just a bit of an introduction. If you don't know what pivots are, if you're not sure, go and look at my blog, thepivottrader.com, and just click on the blog. I just literally put up an article that I'd written quite some time ago, but it looks fine. It's it's sitting there. It will talk all about pivots, but I will show you some now in a short while anyway. Okay, number 1. You should know this, that they are static. If you use them, you'll realize they're static. They don't move during the daytime, well, depending on what period, or they don't move during the period, to be more precise. So if you're looking at a pivot, a daily pivot, it is there, the lines are there in the same place for the whole day, so they're static. A great benefit when you want to be testing. Unlike moving averages, for example, which are moving, this makes back testing and testing strategies, if you're using pivots, easy to do, because you know that that pivot would have been there at the time, and you're not relying on the fact that the moving average moves as the day goes on, for example. Okay, they're easy to build statistics on them because of that, as I've said. So there we go. They're magnetic. Number 2, they are magnetic. What do I mean by this? Well, the chances of the main pivot being hit is very high. If I said it was close to 80% on most currency pairs, for example, you'd be listening a little bit more. Well, it is. And if you don't know that, you should know that. So the main pivot is quite magnetic. Thereafter, there are certain probabilities you should know about the other pivots. Now, of course, knowing that they're magnetic may allow you to set targets. It may also keep you out of position just until it goes and hits the pivot first, if you're looking to trade in a particular direction and it's getting close to it. So it might just help you be on the right side of the trade. So number 3, they're rarely touched. What are rarely touched? Well, of course, the chances of the R3 or the S3 levels being hit is pretty low. And when I'm talking about pretty low, I haven't put the number here. I'm putting 4 to 7%, 7% on a lot of occasions. At the best, they've got a 10% chance on a daily pivot being hit on that day. Now, there are exceptions to everything I'm talking about here. Is when we get markets that have gone very tight and low volatility and low ranges, the next day the pivots will be really pinched, in which case you've got to use some common sense. However, even using the common sense, you'll notice how many times that the pivot still works, at least for part of the time. So, but important to understand, the R3, S3 levels that being hit is pretty low. Right, number 4, if the R1 or the S1 is hit first, what happens then? Well, it makes a significant difference if the R1 or S1's hit before the daily pivot. The chances then of the daily pivot being hit is less. It's reduced quite substantially. And if it's been hit, just watch carefully for the price action. Sometimes if it's in trend, it might have just pulled back, retraced to an R1 or an S1, whichever direction it's going in, and then yep, if it's in trend, the daily pivot may still be an opportunity. However, just be very careful that when the price has hit these first, and this is about trend and the strength of the market. If they're if the price is into that area, there's a greater chance that the pivot itself won't get hit. It won't come back and look at it. So number 5, the R2 and the S2, important thing you should know, because I see people teaching some really dodgy strategies that involve the R2 or the S2. They are not great targets. Hit about 20% of the time on most currency pairs on a daily pivot. Now, coming down the time frames, if you're looking at a 4-hour pivot or an hourly pivot, those stats will be way out, but not massively out actually on a 4-hourly. So the stats are out there. So just be aware, if you're looking, I've seen strategies that if it breaks through the R1, you trade it up to the R2. Now, it might do it the next day, providing it's it's not chopping around. It might go up there and do that level the next day, but be aware that the actual percentages of running outside of the R1s by any great 80% of the time it's sitting in between the R1 and the S1. So I say this is particularly important for day traders. However, if you're trading on even looking at the monthly pivot, the probability of it being hit that isn't that great. It sits around the same. It doesn't change too much. Now I'm going to show you a chart, and I'm going to show you some pivots. So here's the pivots. I've left the old ones on here. This is the euro dollar. And this is today, as I'm recording this. It's just, yeah, price action still moving. It's not a dead chart. And look at what happened most of this morning. It was into its R1. Most of the morning, it just held it. Now, I'm not saying it won't run up at some point and hit this R2, but the probability is not great. It might happen tomorrow. It might happen the next day, but particularly for day traders, the probabilities today is not, as I say, is not particularly great. Yesterday, look, it hit the S1, never got back to the pivot, hit it early, never had the strength to come back. Now here's quite a contrarian day. The previous day was quite a tight range. And look, the pivots are pinched, and it ran through everything. Actually, I don't talk about the R3s and R4s because they're so rarely hit, but it found support into an R4, an S4, beg your pardon. And tight ranges here, tight ranges all the way through on this euro, on this chart. And the pivots tighter and pinched tighter together. You see they're pinched. They just pulled together a lot tighter. The R1, S1, pretty close to the pivot itself. But on all of these occasions, look, it hit the S1 first and it didn't quite get up to its pivot. The strength wasn't in the market. It was suggesting downside. The trend OK was already there. Again, well, this one hit the pivot, went down to the S1, didn't go down to the S2, but it did it the next day. So I'm not suggesting you shouldn't be looking at them as targets at all on these levels, because in a trending market, sure, it's going to go hit at some point. However, if you're looking at it on an intraday basis and you're going to close out, or that's your hope, entering at this point here, hoping to get to this point here. Yep, did it on this occasion, but a lot of the times it just doesn't work for you. So you can see it acts as the main pivot can act as a resistance point. I like it particularly on the monthly time frames and the weekly time frames as resistance points where we're in decent trends and it comes back. I'm looking at a couple at the moment, and they're just around their weekly pivots at the moment. So different time frames, different pivots, but there we go. I'm going to leave it here. It's a 7-8 minute video. One last thing I should have said is please, I'm trying to build my website and my YouTube site up. Please, if you like this video, subscribe and put a thumbs up. I really appreciate that. We'll get more hits. Thank you very much. Bye for now.